So some people say, why do you say it's a psychohistory of British elitism? Well, psychohistory is a rather new discipline in some way, which takes psychological understanding and looks at history and sees how have movements of thought influenced our history, and how have we been following perhaps various things unconsciously that have created our world that we don't really know as in terms of groups, societies. And I suppose I first grappled with this as a very young man when I had a job straight after public school and Oxford as a teacher in a boarding school in India. And India I found was a very exciting place, but it was quite overwhelming psychically. And I asked myself, how the hell did the Brits manage to govern all this with so few people for so long? And it took me many, many years to find an answer, but that in a way started my own search. And what I see now is that there was a way that the British began to think of themselves, certainly in the 19th century, after the French Revolution, terrified by what happened under the French Revolution, where British society kind of rigidified itself and developed a certain kind of character who was to support the notion of Britannia ruling the waves. And in fact, when Darwin came along and talked about the evolution of the species, it was as if the British began to believe of themselves as the top of the tree. And with this indomitable idea, in my book I say it is a kind of external grandiosity driven by internal fear that the order would be overturned as it was in France. The British began to dominate the world through their colonial project and their industrial project hand in hand. So I also go back to think about colonialism. You know, how is it that the Western European, it's not just the British, managed to run such a striking colonial project in which they seemed as if they believed themselves entitled to take what they found, to enslave other people, and to found really the wealth of Europe on this. And I go back with this and I start to think about the Enlightenment and what the Enlightenment did for Westerners was it allowed them to come out of the superstitious mindset of the Middle Ages, but also to value inquiry, rationality, the mind, the thought, the thinking person, the measurer of the world, so that the scientific method became the way we looked at the world. The problem was that if the rational man, I call this the rational man project, was the measurer, those people who weren't rational men became the measured and lost in status and lost in dignity. So it meant that we could enslave people without too much of a conscience. It meant that we could run the Indians and the Red Indians, particularly the latter, off their land without wondering what was the validity in doing this, because we were rational men and they were savages. And savages were the non-rational, were the dissociated from. And in this period also, this level of dissociation and objectification became even stronger, so that women became non-rational, children became non-rational, and that allowed the British, for example, to go back where I started from, to develop these schools where the boy children were sent away from the influence of the women and to encourage to dissociate from their non-rational feelings, their attachment needs, and become servants and administrators of this empire.